Alright guys, let's be real. Every fan has asked that question. What if? What if my team landed that 5-star quarterback? What if that wide receiver never transferred? In this video, we're running through the biggest recruiting what-ifs scenarios in college football. Some of these what-ifs are pretty wild, and in 15 minutes, we're going to cover the biggest ones and break down how different the sport might look today. Johnny Manziel. Imagine this. It's the summer of 2010, and Johnny Manziel, fresh off dazzling coaches at an Oregon camp, commits on the spot to the Ducks. Chip Kelly, mastermind of the Blur offense, is smitten. Manziel's dual-threat fireworks seemed tailor-made for the high-octane machine in Eugene. Kelly would later admit, "He broke my heart when Manziel flipped to Texas A&M." In reality, of course, Manziel chose the Aggies, redshirted, then burst onto the national stage in 2012, winning the Heisman Trophy as a redshirt freshman and becoming Johnny Football. But what if he had stayed with Oregon? He would have entered a crowded quarterback room featuring Marcus Mariota, Darren Thomas, and Brian Bennett, setting up a legendary QB battle. Some insiders suggest Mariota, at one point rattled enough to nearly transfer to Washington, might not have blossomed as he did. Others argue Mariota's steady growth and system fit would have eclipsed Manziel's flash. Had Manziel thrived in Eugene, Oregon might have boasted back-to-back Heisman winners, with Kelly's offense even more electrifying and the Ducks cementing themselves as national juggernauts. But either way, one thing's undeniable. Both Manziel's and Mariota's legacies, and college football history itself, would look profoundly different. Travis Hunter. Imagine a world where Travis Hunter never flipped from Florida State. In 2022, he was the nation's #1 recruit, a generational two-way star destined to change the game. At the last moment, though, he shocked everyone by choosing Coach Prime Sanders at Jackson State. Why? Sanders promised something no Power 5 coach would: full freedom to play both sides of the ball. That gamble paid off. Hunter followed Prime to Colorado, became the first player ever to win both the Fred Biletnikoff Award, top receiver, and Chuck Bednarik Award, top defender, added a Heisman Trophy, and went #2 overall in the 2025 NFL Draft. But what if he had stayed with FSU? Florida State's deep resources would have polished his talent, but he likely would have been locked into one position. No Ironman role, no two-way revolution. He'd still be a superstar, but not the trailblazer who redefined recruiting and put HBCU to FBS pipelines on the map. As Hunter said, "I try not to think, it changed my life forever." Justin Fields. Now picture this. Justin Fields never backs off his pledge to Penn State. In June 2017, when he decommitted, he admitted it felt like breaking up with a girlfriend. The Georgia native suddenly had every powerhouse in America calling: Alabama, Oregon, Georgia, and the pull to stay closer to home proved too strong. But what if he had stuck with James Franklin and the Nittany Lions? In Happy Valley, Fields could have been the centerpiece of a dynamic Penn State offense, combining his cannon arm with electric running ability. With him under center, the Lions might have challenged Ohio State head-on for Big Ten crowns and punched their ticket to the college football playoff. A Heisman finalist in blue and white? Very possible. Instead, Fields transferred to Ohio State after a brief stint at Georgia and flourished, guiding the Buckeyes to multiple playoff runs and cementing himself as one of college football's best dual-threat quarterbacks. For Penn State, his loss stung, a program-altering what-if that still lingers. Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy's recruiting story is one of the juiciest what-ifs in recent memory. Originally committed to Michigan in 2021, he ran into admissions issues that blocked his early enrollment. That hurdle reopened his recruitment, and Texas swooped in, giving the Longhorns their lightning-fast playmaker. But imagine if he had cleared those hurdles and actually suited up in Ann Arbor. With J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, Ronnie Bell, and Cornelius Johnson around him, Worthy's speed would have stretched defenses immediately. Michigan's offense, often criticized for being too run-heavy, could have gone vertical much earlier. Picture more deep shots, bubble screens, and explosive punt returns. Worthy turning close games into blowouts. His presence might have boosted Michigan's wide receiver recruiting too, drawing more elite talent. Meanwhile, Texas loses its breakout freshman star, and their resurgent storyline never feels the same. One decision, and the ripple effects would reshape two blue blood programs. Bijan Robinson, the elite running back of the 2020 recruiting class, nearly committed to Ohio State silently for about a week before switching to Texas, influenced by a sense that Ohio State just didn't feel right and guidance from coaches and family. Ohio State's ground game would be dominant. Bijan's early season workload and explosiveness could tilt close matchups into blowouts. His presence might have added another layer in playoff games, potentially shifting outcomes in college football playoff matchups, conference titles, or even national championship runs. Ohio State's RB legacy deepens. Future backs may cite Robinson as the gold standard and hang their hat on his success. Meanwhile, at Texas, Robinson lived out the 40-year decision. He became the Doak Walker Award winner, racked up over 3,400 rushing yards, and delivered as a first-round NFL pick. Stetson Bennett. Imagine a world where Stetson Bennett never walked on at Georgia. Coming out of high school as a lesser-known two-star QB, Bennett received just one FBS offer from Middle Tennessee State and elected to walk on at Georgia instead. His journey was famously unconventional, but what if he chose differently? Without that walk-on path, Bennett likely takes the MTSU scholarship, starts his career out of Georgia's orbit, and the Georgia QB depth chart shifts. With Fields gone to Ohio State, Georgia would lean more heavily on recruits like JT Daniels or other scholarships. There's no Bennett stepping in after Daniels' injury in 2021, and certainly no Cinderella story igniting. A different QB starts for Georgia, potentially leading to more inconsistency in critical games. Without Bennett, Georgia's back-to-back national championships in 2021 and 2022 unfold differently. Bennett brought poise, late-game grit, and low turnovers. His leadership and performance were pivotal in clutch moments. Another QB may still win. Georgia's talent is deep, but there's no storyline of the humble walk-on turned two-time CFP champion, no Manning Award, no Burlsworth Trophy, no underdog legend. Quinn Ewers. Now imagine Quinn Ewers never leaves Ohio State, choosing instead to enroll and stick with the Buckeyes rather than transferring to Texas. Ewers initially committed to Texas, decommitted, then signed with Ohio State, before transferring back to Texas in December 2021. If he stayed in Columbus, Ohio State would enjoy a top-tier quarterback whose high school hype matched that of Vince Young as a long-term project. At Ohio State, Ewers competes with C.J. Stroud and others to lead an already elite offense. If he won the starting job, he brings pro-caliber arm talent to Big Ten play. This would shift OSU's quarterback dynamics, possibly altering transfer opportunities for others and influencing Big Ten power balance, especially if Fields hadn't also transferred. For Texas, the Longhorns lose their five-star quarterback, needing to search elsewhere. Their rise in recent years could stall or take different shape. At Texas, Ewers becomes a key architect of playoff runs, ranking third all-time in passing yards and touchdowns. In the alternate OSU scenario, those numbers go to another QB, but Ohio State's offense gets a boost, potentially altering CFP appearances, Big Ten titles, and recruiting momentum. Ewers' eventual NFL draft path changes too. Instead of becoming a day 3 pick projected by analysts, Ohio State's stronger platform and system might elevate his draft stock, or competition could lower it, depending on performance and scheme. Meanwhile, Texas's QB future shifts. Arch Manning may start earlier, or the team searches elsewhere. Bryce Young. In July 2018, Bryce Young, one of the most highly touted QB prospects in the nation, committed to USC and was expected to compete for playing time behind JT Daniels or immediately take over after Daniels' injury-plagued seasons ahead. The promise of staying local, close to home in Southern California, was appealing to him. Yet in September 2019, he flipped his commitment to Alabama, citing the desire to put himself in the best football situation. As a result, Young went on to win the Heisman Trophy, collect nearly every major college football award in 2021, and become the #1 overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. What if? Had Young stayed at USC, he would have been the Trojan offense's centerpiece, probably winning the starting job upon enrollment. USC's then coaching staff would be building around a future star. A Young-led USC might have been more competitive in the Pac-12, contending for playoff spots and reviving the program's elite status. High school prospects might have followed his lead, boosting USC's recruiting pipeline significantly. But without Bryce's production, Alabama's offense looks very different. No Heisman in 2021, no championships, and perhaps a shift in Tide Dynasty timelines. Meanwhile, Young's NFL trajectory might have changed. Would he still go first overall? Or would USC's offense limit exposure compared to the national stage Alabama provided? Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley initially committed to Rutgers in 2014, a rare local success story for the Scarlet Knights. However, after Penn State entered the picture with a scholarship offer, Barkley flipped and never suited up for Rutgers. At Penn State, he exploded onto the national scene, setting school records, earning All-American honors, and finishing high in Heisman voting. His college stardom paved the way to becoming the #2 overall pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, and later, an NFL Offensive Player of the Year and Super Bowl champion. What if Barkley had honored his Rutgers commitment? The trajectory of both programs would be massively different. Rutgers, a middling Big Ten program, would suddenly boast one of the nation's most exciting talents. Barkley's presence could have energized their offense, drawn national attention, and potentially lifted their recruiting classes for years. Imagine Rutgers becoming the next rise story of the Big Ten. On the other hand, Penn State would have lacked the dynamic playmaker who helped elevate the program's national profile. Their offense would need a different identity. They might have missed out on certain bowl wins or playoff bids. Individually, Barkley's development may differ. While Rutgers gave him an opportunity, Penn State's system, exposure, and coaching were critical to his breakout and ultimately NFL craft. Would he have become a top 5 pick? Hard to say. His NFL dominance, rushing records, Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Super Bowl success stemmed in part from Penn State's platform, Ja'Marr Chase. In the summer of 2017, Ja'Marr Chase was expected to commit to TCU during a televised ceremony on the NFL Network at the opening, a high-profile recruiting event. He'd even coordinated props like TCU hats, flags, and a custom skit to declare his commitment publicly. But due to a scheduling mishap and abrupt programming changes, his moment never aired, which sparked doubts and left him considering alternatives. He eventually signed with LSU, his home state school, instead. What if Chase had followed through with his TCU pledge? TCU would have landed one of the nation's elite recruits, an explosive, big-play receiver whose presence could elevate a Horned Frogs program already thriving under Coach Patterson. With Chase stretching the field, TCU's offense would have gained a transformative weapon. His game-breaking speed and route running would have significantly impacted their standing in the Big 12, perhaps positioning them for college football playoff consideration during that era. On the flip side, LSU's offense would look starkly different. In reality, Chase became Joe Burrow's top target in LSU's historic 2019 national championship run, earning the Fred Biletnikoff Award and setting records for receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. Without him, LSU would lose its explosive deep threat, likely reshaping key games and potentially altering the Tigers' path to a title. Chase's absence would send ripple effects through SEC recruiting and national power dynamics. Moreover, his NFL narrative shifts dramatically. At LSU, he became a top 5 pick, an NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, and ultimately one of the league's most dominant wide receivers. At TCU, his stats, exposure, and accolades might be different, perhaps lesser, perhaps different, but the path would diverge meaningfully from history. Drake Maye. In July 2019, Drake Maye, a consensus 4-star quarterback, verbally committed to Alabama under Nick Saban. However, about 8 months later, he decommitted, choosing to stay close to home and commit to North Carolina, his family's alma mater, a move he described as emotionally difficult, especially having to call Coach Saban to break the news. What if Maye had remained with Alabama instead of flipping to UNC? Had he stayed, Alabama would have had a top-tier quarterback to groom within their loaded pipeline, possibly altering the trajectory of the Crimson Tide's offensive identity. Maye's talent would have fit seamlessly in the Saban system, adding a dynamic, dual-threat dimension to their offense. He could have potentially become a 5-year starter, shifting their passing schemes and roster decisions, and influencing outcomes in tight SEC title games or playoff battles. Meanwhile, North Carolina would be without the ACC Player of the Year, who in 2022 led the nation in total offense and set school records for passing yards and touchdowns. Their resurgence and playoff pushes over the last few seasons would be dampened. Loss of momentum, fewer national mentions, and less recruiting buzz. On the pro side, Maye's entire narrative would shift. At UNC, he became a top 3 NFL draft pick and earned Pro Bowl honors as a rookie. At Alabama, he may still be a high pick, but his style, system familiarity, and media portrayal might alter both expectations and outcome. Caleb Williams, a high school phenom and the top-ranked dual-threat quarterback in the 2021 class, ultimately committed to Oklahoma, citing his development opportunities under the Sooners system. That said, LSU was a serious contender early in the recruitment. Williams made unofficial visits, and there were genuine connections between his family and LSU coaches like Joe Brady. But what if Williams had chosen LSU instead? The Tigers' offensive trajectory could have been jolted upward dramatically. His arm talent, athleticism, and experience executing elite-level plays might have positioned LSU as a national powerhouse earlier, potentially accelerating their return to championship contention. Williams would have been the centerpiece of an offense stocked with elite talent in Baton Rouge, perhaps leading LSU to playoff runs in the early 2000s and 20s. Moreover, the ripple effect on recruiting would be substantial. Williams signing with LSU might have emboldened more quarterback and offensive talent to follow, a summer domino effect that could have reshaped the SEC recruiting landscape. Conversely, Oklahoma's offense and their 2022 national championship run, led by Williams, would look drastically different without it. The Sooners might have turned to a less dynamic replacement, likely shifting them away from title contention. Individually, Williams' national exposure and Heisman trajectory could look different. LSU's environment is fertile, but is it on par, especially during rebuilding years, with Oklahoma's spotlighted platform at the time? Perhaps yes, perhaps slightly less. Nevertheless, he still may have become a Heisman contender, but with a variant storyline. Kenneth Walker III began his career at Wake Forest, but transferred to Michigan State after the 2020 season, citing a misfit between his explosive skill set and their slow mesh offensive scheme. At MSU, Walker exploded. His debut showcased 264 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns, and he went on to earn Doak Walker and Walter Camp Player of the Year honors and finish 6th in Heisman voting. Michigan State's offense surged, leapfrogging by reputation and success, largely on Walker's legs. But what if? What if Walker had stayed put at Wake Forest? Under that scenario, Wake's offense might have continued to stifle his natural burst and playmaking ability, likely limiting his statistical production and national profile. Without Walker, the Demon Deacons would lack their sudden offensive spark, and their season outcomes and recruiting would likely suffer. Meanwhile, MSU would not experience the dramatic resurgence they enjoyed in 2021. Without Walker's standout performances, their offense would lack explosiveness, and their climb back into Big Ten relevance could have been delayed, or rely on others less gifted at avoiding tackles and breaking big plays. Individually, Walker's NFL trajectory might have shifted. The standout campaign at Michigan State accelerated his NFL draft stock. He went on to be a standout early-round pick and an immediate contributor in the NFL. Without that stage-setting season, Walker may have labored in relative obscurity, even while being talented, limiting his exposure and draft outcome. Tua Tagovailoa's recruitment was filled with what-ifs. Essentially, the idea of him following the trail of Marcus Mariota to Oregon was real, even though Oregon didn't offer until after he already committed to Alabama. He grew up idolizing Mariota and dreamed of donning the Ducks' winged helmet. If Tua had ended up at Oregon, the Pac-12 landscape and perhaps the National College Football axis might have shifted dramatically. Oregon would gain not just a sensational dual-threat quarterback, but also rally a program with renewed national relevance. A Tua-led offense in Eugene could have contended for playoff berths, revived recruiting pipelines in the West, and changed the Ducks' trajectory during the late 2010s. Meanwhile, Alabama's dynasty would look different. Without Tua delivering in the 2018 championship game and beyond, Coach Saban's offense may have relied heavily on Jalen Hurts or other alternatives, possibly dampening title runs and altering SEC power dynamics. For Tua personally, Oregon's pro-style yet creative offense might have showcased a different skill package, more on-the-run mobility and spread concepts than Alabama's structured system. Whether he'd have earned the same awards or Heisman-level acclaim or impacted NFL stock the same way is an open question. Still, he likely remains a standout, but cast in green and yellow, not crimson and white. C.J. Stroud, now a star at Ohio State and in the NFL, seriously considered the Georgia Bulldogs before signing with OSU. Coach Kirby Smart recruited him personally, and Stroud took official visits to Athens. Had Stroud committed to Georgia, their offense, already potent with recruits like J.T. Daniels or Stetson Bennett, would have added one of the top QB talents in the nation. His accuracy and poise could have accelerated Georgia's offensive development, potentially impacting their path in SEC championships and playoff appearances. On the flip side, Ohio State wouldn't have had Stroud sliding seamlessly into their starting QB role after Fields' departure. The Buckeyes' recent offensive success, playoff runs, and Big Ten dominance might have taken a different shape. Another QB, perhaps Quinn Ewers or someone else, steps up, but without Stroud's record-setting performances and Heisman finalist seasons. Stroud's personal trajectory, two-time Heisman finalist, NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, high draft pick, might shift slightly if he played at Georgia. While Georgia provides national exposure, Ohio State's system and coaching machinery helped optimize his rapid rise in individual records. Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow grew up idolizing Nebraska. His family had deep ties to the Cornhuskers, his father and brothers played there, and young Joe envisioned himself following in their footsteps. Yet, despite his passion, Nebraska's coaches ultimately passed on him, reportedly unconvinced by his arm strength and fit as a quarterback. That turned him toward Ohio State, where he redshirted and backed up for 2 years before transferring to LSU, where he exploded as a Heisman-winning national champion and first overall NFL pick. What if Nebraska had recruited and signed Burrow? If Burrow ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska's offense would have gained a high IQ, pocket-aware quarterback with elite accuracy and leadership. His arrival could have transformed the Cornhuskers from Big Ten also-rans into playoff contenders. With his ability to elevate an offense, Nebraska might have reclaimed national relevance earlier. Not only would the Huskers program arc change, but so would the trajectories of Ohio State and LSU. Without Burrow, Ohio State would have retained a backup quarterback with limited success. LSU likely doesn't capture the 2019 national title. There's no Heisman season, no historic campaign. For Burrow personally, the path might have been different. Less spotlight than LSU's glowing stage, but potentially similar success under a powerful West-style system system in Lincoln. His legendary 2019 season may never occur, but even shorn of that greatness, Burrow likely still could have forged an impactful NFL career, though perhaps with a different narrative arc. Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's recruitment began at Rutgers. He wanted to be a hometown hero and help elevate the program, but in late 2016, he decommitted and ultimately chose Wisconsin, where he flourished, amassing over 6,000 rushing yards, capturing 2 Doak Walker Awards, and becoming a perennial college powerhouse. What if Taylor had stayed with Rutgers? Rutgers would have suddenly had a generational talent, anchoring its offense. Taylor's explosive running style and consistent production could have turned Rutgers into a surprise offensive power in the Big Ten, improving their win totals, boosting morale, and sparking stronger recruiting classes in the region. On the flip side, Wisconsin loses one of the most productive running backs in FBS history. Their offense, reliant on Taylor's breakaway speed and versatility, would have looked significantly different. They may not have seen the same dominance in the Big Ten, perhaps affecting their postseason success. Individually, Taylor might still have found success at Rutgers, but lacking Wisconsin's proven scheme, coaching, and development platform could have dampened his national profile. His breakout seasons that vaulted him into early NFL draft consideration and eventual Colts standout may have been subdued. Jayden Daniels. What if Jayden Daniels had stayed at Arizona State instead of taking the leap to LSU? Daniels, a dynamic dual-threat quarterback, entered the transfer portal after his 2021 season at Arizona State University, explaining that LSU offered him the chance to showcase his full potential on a bigger stage and compete with more resources and weapons around him. If he'd stayed at Arizona State, at ASU, Daniels had already set freshman passing records and earned Pac-12 honors, but he faced limitations, coaching instability, NCAA scrutiny, and fewer high-profile targets. Remaining there might have meant strong local acclaim, but a likely ceiling in national exposure. He would have continued as the team's leader, but without the narrative fuel that comes with SEC spotlight. Consequences for LSU and the national stage. By transferring, Daniels transformed LSU's offense, leading them through record-breaking seasons, earning the Heisman Trophy, and securing multiple national awards. Without his arrival, LSU's resurgence would look radically different. Their offense might have lacked its spark, and team success, including playoff bids and Tiger pride, could have faltered. Daniels' legacy. Down at LSU, Daniels not only earned Heisman honors, but became the SEC's Male Athlete of the Year, and launched into a star-studded NFL career with the Washington Commanders. If he'd stayed at ASU, Daniels might still have thrived, but his legacy likely would have remained regional rather than national, and perhaps he'd be a mid-round draft pick, not a generational Heisman figure. If Jayden Daniels hadn't transferred to LSU, Arizona State keeps a celebrated star, but college football misses out on one of the most electrifying dual-threat Heisman runs in recent memory. Jameson Williams. What if Jameson Williams had stayed at Ohio State instead of transferring to Alabama? A highly touted wide receiver out of high school, Williams saw limited opportunities at Ohio State, buried behind elite depth like Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. His transfer to Alabama set the stage for his breakout, posting 79 receptions, 1,572 yards, and 15 touchdowns in 2021, and earning All-American honors. If he'd stayed at Ohio State, Williams' path could have been blocked by returning stars and limited target share. Even if he'd carved out playing time, his stats probably wouldn't top 1,500 yards. He might still help the Buckeyes with depth, but lack the signature season needed for national recognition. Ripple effects at Alabama. Williams' departure created a vacuum which Alabama filled with explosive plays that powered their offense that season. Without him, Alabama's receiving core depth and impact diminishes, altering close game outcomes, recruiting momentum, or even that season's championship bids. Career trajectory. At Alabama, Williams became a top NFL prospect, AJP draft pick, and headline icon for his dynamic catches. At OSU, he likely enters the draft with modest production, maybe late round 1 or round 2, but without the WR Jewel status.
And guys, that's the end of today's trip through college football's biggest recruiting what-ifs. Which one blew your mind the most? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to CFB Almanac for more weekly CFB deep dives. We're building a community of fans who love the sport as much as you do.